Halo 3 ODST's development dates back to an episodic Peter Jackson game, before eventually becoming the film noir-inspired detective story we know today. Created in half the time of any previous Halo, ODST fearlessly experimented with new mechanics while sporting an expertly crafted narrative. So, my name is Same Token, and today we'll be reflecting on what made it a fan favorite in a retrospective of Halo 3 ODST. As the story goes, director Peter Jackson was lined up to make a Halo movie, complete with replica props accurate enough to excite any Halo fan. For a brief period, it was making headlines. But then, it all fell apart, and the project was scrapped. Now, while the movie's cancellation was big news, a related but smaller project also collapsed around the same time. Peter Jackson's Wingnut Interactive was working with Bungie to create a game called Halo Chronicles. Jackson described this as being the filmiest game, revealing its story in interactive episodes, perhaps in the vein of Telltale's The Walking Dead. Joseph Staten, writing director for Halo 3, had developed various concepts for taking Halo in this new direction that he was excited to explore. But then, of course, the plug was pulled. Bungie were in the process of separating from Microsoft, and as part of this agreement, they had to produce two new projects. One was a fourth Halo installment that would become Reach, and the other was supposed to be Halo Chronicles before it was cancelled. This left a talented team without a project and a contractual obligation to come up with another game. Realizing that they had a very narrow window before Halo Reach's development ramped up and consumed the entirety of Bungie, studio head Harold Ryan came to Joseph Staten and told him that if he had an idea for a game, they should go ahead and make it. It had to be simple, fast, and based in the Halo 3 engine. It should be around 2 hours long, there would be no help from engineering, and they only had a year to develop, far shorter than Bungie's usual 3. Of course, Staten jumped at this opportunity. Joseph Staten feels that, as a creative person, you never want to do the same thing in exactly the same way again. A belief that he carried over to this project, making a Halo game with a unique spin. Staten and Paul Bertone, a campaign design lead for Halo 3, were tiring of Master Chief's perceived invulnerability. It was becoming hard to ratchet up the stakes when he's already saved the galaxy from an insurmountable threat. They were ready to tell a more human story. Orbital Dropshock Troopers, or ODSTs, were a natural choice for their new protagonists. Hardened enough to make for exciting gameplay, recognizable enough from their striking armor, and yet vulnerable enough to tell a character-driven story. As a huge fan of film noir, Staten wanted to somehow integrate a gritty detective story into the Halo universe. Martin O'Donnell, director and composer for Halo 3, wasn't quite sure this would work. Film noir and Halo? An unusual concoction. But as soon as he saw the early concept art, he was on board. Instinctually, he felt this needed a lonely, jazzy vibe, something more intimate and personal. So he sat down at the piano and just started playing. The piece he came up with was called Rain, and it made it into the final product. O'Donnell's early involvement throughout development processes has resulted in games with tightly connected musical and visual styles. Halo has always been renowned for its excellent soundtracks, and this new project would be no exception. As a detective story, there had to be a mystery to solve. Set within the events of Halo 2 as a slipspace portal consumes the city of New Mombasa, ODST team Alpha 9 are knocked off course. Waking up hours after events have already unfolded, the player would explore the dark streets of a lonely yet hostile city, attempting to figure out what happened to their squad. Objects scattered around the map would activate flashbacks where the player would see the city from the perspectives of their squad mates set earlier in the day. Bungie had quickly developed their concepts and felt ready to share their ideas with the world. Planning to reveal their project at E3 2008, a countdown timer was displayed on Bungie's website to drum up excitement. However, this was ultimately cancelled by Microsoft. Xbox Senior Vice President Don Matrick wanted to reduce the length of their conference, deciding that it was Halo that had to go. Fans were disappointed, but their patience would eventually be rewarded. Paul Bertone had become fatigued on building linear story missions. Halo games are generally comprised of connected corridors, pushing players through various battle theaters to the tune of its story. This had worked really well for the franchise, offering a compelling combat loop. And Halo isn't alone in thriving on linear gameplay. But as with the film noir-inspired story, Bungie wanted to try something slightly different. As a smaller project, Bertone felt that this game was perfect for experimenting with open-world elements. Rather than going all in, it was decided that the campaign would be split into two parts. One would be flashbacks, which are your standard linear Halo levels with hectic combat and thrilling vehicle battles. And then there would be the hub, an open space that players return to between those flashbacks. Bertone felt that games always pushing you forward can get tiring after a while, and so it's sometimes better to just allow the player to live in the world a little. Some games accomplish this pacing through regularly mixing between combat, exploration, and puzzles. In this case, it was the hub that was used to slow everything down between the blockbuster firefights of the flashbacks. In creating the hub, they experimented with various building shapes and layers. As they had to contort the Halo 3 engine into doing things beyond its initial scope, like making open-world spaces, they used various tricks to sell the atmosphere. For instance, to conserve resources, they sectioned off the map using doors so that previous sections could be unloaded from memory. To further contrast between the flashbacks and the hub, O'Donnell and Michael Salvatori used different musical styles, switching between solo saxophone mixed with orchestral instruments to elicit feelings of jazz, and electric guitar with heavier percussion for those blockbuster sequences. Of course, new elements were introduced too. Silenced versions of the SMG and Magnum were added to the ODST's arsenal, along with a new Covenant enemy type, the Engineer, which provides an extra layer of shields for its allies. In place of a motion tracker, Visor mode was created, which paints outlines around enemies, highlights secrets, and acts as a kind of night vision. With players free to explore a big city hub, they wanted to provide optional narratives that would enhance Staten's main plotline. For this, they contacted an old partner they worked with during Halo 2. Alternate reality games are interactive narratives told using the real world, often used as marketing campaigns. They can involve hundreds of thousands of players completing activities, like deciphering a puzzle, to unlock new elements of a story. To promote the release of Halo 2 in 2004, 42 Entertainment created the award-winning alternate reality game I Love Bees. This saw players locating and answering phone booths across the US, solving complex puzzles, and crowdsourcing the direction of an abstract story set in the Halo universe. In seeking to create optional narratives for ODST on a tight schedule, Bungie brought in the staff that worked on I Love Bees, who are now working at Fourth Wall Entertainment. Staten kept thinking, what if some of the phones in the city rang? What if the ticket kiosks began spitting tickets? What if the city itself was trying to communicate? And so, Sadie's story and the city's AI superintendent were born. As players traverse the city to solve the mystery of what happened to their squad mates, an optional story would be available for players to access by locating fully voiced audio logs scattered across the map. From these, the player would learn the story of a young woman's harrowing journey during the Covenant invasion of Earth. Created as a spin on Inferno, a poem about Dante's journey through hell guided by the ancient poet Virgil, Sadie is initially trapped on a train representing the first circle of hell, Limbo. Each new person she meets is a reference to another circle of hell, such as lust, gluttony, and greed. During her journey, she is protected by one of the superintendent's subroutines created by her father, called Virgil. This then links back to the main story, as the superintendent would go on to guide the player on their own journey, their own form of Dante's Inferno. Ultimately, this story within a story would infuse a great deal of life into the lonely streets of New Mombasa. By September 2008, fans were very eager to find out more about Bungie's game that Microsoft cancelled at E3. And so, Bungie started their timer again. And this time, they managed to deliver, publishing a teaser trailer that announced their new project to the world. It was being called Halo 3 Recon and had a release date of fall 2009, though the name was soon changed to Halo 3 ODST. One, because they felt it was more representative of the game, and two, because the Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon team were apparently not very happy. So there wasn't long to wait for a great little addition to Halo 3, which Bungie planned on selling for only $30. But of course, it wasn't quite that simple. At this point, their original plan for a 2 to 3 hour mini-campaign basically wasn't happening. Somewhere down the line, they effectively started building an entirely new game. Initially, they wanted to under-promise and over-deliver. When talking to the press, they'd say it was just a small campaign expansion, and to expect some extra little fun in the Halo 3 engine. But as the game continued to expand in scope, Microsoft took notice and started to feel that they were actually sitting on a big $60 release, and so they decided to push it to their Christmas 2009 release window. Not all at Bungie were keen on this change. Now they were worried they were overpromising with the threat of under-delivering. In response, Joseph Staten said that if it's gonna be worth $60, they want to be able to polish it more. Compared to Halo Reach, Staten describes Halo 3 ODST as the scrappy little project, and yet the team felt it was the most fun they ever had making a Halo game. Development initially got off to a surprisingly fast start thanks to having a stable engine already available. Usually they'd be developing alongside the creation of a new Halo engine, but ODST had the benefit of the work they had done on Halo 3. With the price going up, in addition to shipping the game with Halo 3's multiplayer, which included 3 exclusive maps, they had just one more feature to create: Firefight. Bungie have always been passionate about playing games with friends, dating all the way back to their 1992 release of Minotaur. ODST was already set to ship with Halo 3's multiplayer, but they still wanted to introduce a new cooperative feature: Enter Firefight. Firefight essentially takes the encounters in Truth and Reconciliation from Combat Evolved, which was basically wave after wave of enemies, and matches it with Halo 3's campaign scoring and skulls. Although many compared this to Gears of War 2's Horde mode, Bungie had mocked up Firefight during Halo 3's development years prior, even though it was ultimately cut. From early on in ODST's development, they knew they wanted to include some form of wave defense mode, but they didn't have the time to work on an entirely new set of maps. So, instead, when designing the maps for the campaign, they integrated spaces that they thought would work well in Firefight. Thus, some areas that players pass through really quickly in the story are intricate and highly detailed, as they double up as isolated wave defense arenas for Firefight. A clever use of resources that also serve to improve the campaign. As ODST neared its release date, now set for September 22, 2009, Microsoft began ramping up its marketing efforts. A website was launched with an interactive 360-degree video experience, which attracted hundreds of thousands of visitors. And on September 4th, an award-winning live-action advertisement was revealed. The Life follows the journey of Tarkov from the moment he was inspired to become a soldier, to his experiences as an ODST, and finally his development as a leader. Using Bungie's in-game models, Legacy Effects created accurate replica props of the new silenced SMG, ODST armor, and even a full-sized brute miner. Initially debuting on the MySpace and IGN websites, the Life was very well received, drumming up a great deal of excitement for ODST. After an accidental early sale at a French retailer and some positive press releases by Microsoft justifying its $60 price tag, a free public launch event was hosted in Seattle. Around 800 Halo fans queued around the block to gain access, many of whom were planning on heading straight to game stores hosting midnight launches afterwards. And then finally, after an incredibly short yet smooth development cycle, Halo 3 ODST was released. While the hub was a world apart from the Halo everyone knew, critics praised the campaign's use of flashbacks, feeling that they played out like a greatest hits compilation. Essentially bringing back the cast of Firefly, including Nathan Fillion, the flashbacks begin with squad leader Buck rampaging through New Mombasa's streets as he searches for Veronica Dare, an Oni officer with whom he had a romantic past. Next is Dutch as he speeds through the nature reserve on a warthog, destroyed wraiths in his wake. Then Mickey, who drives a tank through central plazas, and Romeo, sniping on the rooftops of the police HQ. Every element that makes an amazing Halo experience is distilled and laser focused on delivering the high points fans were missing after they had finished the fight. After each flashback vignette, players return to the lonely hub to explore at their own pace. Bungie's desire to tell a human story is fully realized as the player becomes the rookie. Searching for beacons in the form of various items, like a helmet smashed into a monitor, successfully evokes that feeling of being a detective. Equally rewarding is locating Sadie's audio logs across the city, telling an interesting companion narrative. It's easy to imagine still enjoying the game without following Sadie's story at all, but to do so would be a huge shame as they greatly enhance the experience of ODST's campaign. And then there's the city's superintendent AI, helpfully guiding players to their next objective while playing a central role in both Sadie's story and the main plotline. While some players who are only here to kill some coveys may miss the superintendent's hints, observant players are often rewarded. Ultimately, the hub works exceptionally well, with critics praising its ability to weave together the plot in a more interesting way than a linear series of levels. Halo 3's engine was starting to show its age, yet ODST still managed to look fantastic thanks to its brilliant artistic direction. From the thrilling drop from space, to a colossal space elevator plunging to the ground, it was a visual treat. New Mombasa looks great at night too, with its striking architecture, flickering video signs, and dramatic skyboxes. Visor mode allowed them to keep the city believably dark without sacrificing gameplay, and when it's turned on, you really feel like you've donned a futuristic high-tech helmet. Exploring the city is incredibly atmospheric, a truly unique experience for Halo that has aged incredibly well. This is in large part thanks to the phenomenal audio design, building tension with the careful use of ambience. And for ODST, Martin O'Donnell and Michael Salvatori created perhaps the best Halo score ever. From the powerful beats that complement the blockbuster vignettes, to the eerie sounds crafted for the city hub. ODST plays slightly different to Halo 3, as players are now more vulnerable, though some elements are reminiscent of Combat Evolved. For instance, rather than having recharging health beneath your overshield, ODSTs must replenish their health using health packs scattered around the map. Otherwise, a frustrating red glow consumes the screen while a maddening beeping sound grows ever louder. That is, until you die. Of course, ODST retains Halo's core gameplay mechanics, The classic 30 seconds of fun combat loop returns, ensuring the experience is always at its peak, as does the golden triangle of guns, grenades, and melee. We do lose dual wielding, specifically because some Bungie staff hated it, and we also no longer have player deployable equipment, though you can always squat in a Brute's bubble shield. Equipment was a unique addition to Halo 3, but its removal certainly doesn't detract from the gameplay here. And you still do have a couple of new weapons to enjoy. The silenced versions of the Magnum and SMG feel and sound fantastic, really selling the feeling that you're one of the elite ODSTs. While the hub worked terrifically in terms of storytelling and atmosphere, some critics suggested that it was less successful as a non-linear gameplay mechanic. Though arguably, it was great for the completionist, with plenty of audio logs to find and achievements to unlock. And that's important to consider, because if you ignore the extras, Halo 3 ODST only clocks in at around 6 hours on normal difficulty, which itself is probably too easy for many players. Sticking it on heroic and immersing yourself in the hub is when ODST really shines, heightening that feeling of loneliness and tension. However, that sentiment is quickly lost as soon as you add a friend to your game. Cooperative play is a Halo staple. Nothing is more fun than teaming up with a friend and mowing down the Covenant like blades of grass. But here, this is a double-edged sword. By increasing the number of buddies shouting down their mics for you to get behind the hunter or that they're out of ammo, you end up reducing ODST's atmosphere and immersion during the hub. But honestly, as long as you play solo in your first playthrough, co-op can only serve to increase the life of the game, offering many hours of replayability. And if you're still looking for more, which for $60 you couldn't be blamed, Firefight was a blast. Wave defense game modes. Such a simple concept, yet for anyone who enjoys kicking back and massacring some grunts and brutes, it could easily triple the amount of time you spend in ODST. Firefight's gameplay is dynamic, turning on and off skull modifiers with each wave. Some rounds see you pelted with an uncanny amount of grenades, while others force you to melee to regain health. It shifts between high difficulty and goofy fun. While Halo is generally known for its linear forward progression, Firefight is proof that its smooth gameplay loop still works in a closed arena. As was the case with co-op, up to 2 players could play locally on the same Xbox. But Firefight was at its best when playing over Xbox Live with 4 players. Now, although addictive, this would eventually become a little repetitive, and because there's no matchmaking, if you don't have any friends playing ODST, you'll be fighting solo. Sooner or later, you'll be heading back into Halo 3's multiplayer on the included second disc, where you'll be enjoying 3 timed exclusive maps: Longshore, Heretic, and Citadel. And when these maps were eventually released as standalone DLC, they were sold for 800 Microsoft points, which is worth about $10. This still wasn't quite enough to prevent frustration at the $60 price tag, but it did go some way in providing value for those who either didn't have the base Halo 3 or really wanted to jump into the latest maps. Either way, ODST came with access to the Halo Reach beta, which made the package worth it for many diehard fans. Halo 3 ODST was a fantastic package. A marvelous, action-packed campaign that succeeded in telling a more human story, effortlessly expanding on the wider Halo universe. Truly wonderful storytelling. A soundtrack that will go down as a fan favorite for its jazzy, atmospheric themes. Firefight, filled to the brim with exciting encounters, is an excellent addition to the franchise, and is fortunately something that would return in Halo Reach. Despite having a relatively small development team with an even smaller development window, they managed to pull off an instant classic. ODST's fearlessness in experimentation, yet ability to incorporate the best of Halo 3's action, ensured that it was a standout Halo experience. Even 343 recognized its potency. After the initial serious teething issues with the Master Chief Collection's matchmaking, they provided ODST for free when they brought it to the package at the end of 2014. Rendered for the first time in true 1080p and more recently 4K, we were given an even clearer look at the longevity of its gameplay and art direction. A bizarre journey, starting as a Peter Jackson game that eventually became a noir detective story set in the Halo universe. Halo 3 ODST really is one of the greats. So, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe and hit the bell icon for more. Stay safe out there, and I'll catch you next time.